What comes to mind when you hear the name Burkina Faso? A forgotten land? A country trapped in endless conflict? A struggling economy barely standing on its feet? That's the story you've been fed. That's the version carefully crafted by the media, where Africa is always a place of crisis, never of triumph. But what if we told you that everything you think you know about Burkina Faso is only half the truth? What if the real story is something far greater? Beyond the headlines of instability and despair, there's another Burkina Faso, one that's growing, building, and reclaiming its future. A nation rich not just in gold but in resilience. A country that refuses to be defined by its struggles, but instead by its strength. You won't hear about Burkina Faso on your nightly news. They won't show you the booming gold industry. They won't talk about the agricultural revolution happening right now. They won't tell you about the young innovators shaping the country's digital future. Because a self-sufficient, thriving Burkina Faso, that's a narrative the world isn't ready for. But today, we are.
These comments and questions and assumptions made me question why. Why were people who had never been to a place could judge it so harshly? When I watched author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, I learned about the danger of single stories. My peers were only exposed to the miserable single story of the dark continent.
So, let's talk about Burkina Faso the media will never show you. Burkina Faso is one of Africa's hidden economic engines, yet a country the world conveniently overlooks. But let's uncover a truth they don't want you to see. Beneath its red earth lies one of the most powerful economic weapons of the 21st century: gold. And not just small deposits here and there. We're talking about an industry so vital, so unstoppable, that even security threats and geopolitical pressure haven't been able to slow it down. While the media paints Burkina Faso as a country on the edge, its gold sector tells a different story. One of strategic growth, increasing production, and a fight to control its destiny. For decades, Burkina Faso's gold industry has been a critical pillar of its economy. The numbers alone speak volumes. In December 2024, Burkina Faso's gold production hit 60,000 kilograms, a staggering amount, considering the turbulence of recent years. And this isn't just a spike in numbers, it's a pattern. The country has consistently ranked among the top gold producers in Africa, alongside giants like South Africa, Ghana, and Mali. But what makes this achievement even more remarkable is that it's happening despite external pressures. Western narratives claim Burkina Faso is struggling, yet its gold production continues to expand. Why? Because this isn't just about extraction, it's about control. Who controls the gold? For decades, Burkina Faso's gold industry was tightly controlled by Western corporations, funneling profits out of the continent while leaving behind environmental destruction and economic instability. But today, the tide is turning. The Burkinabe government is shifting policies, encouraging domestic participation in gold mining, renegotiating contracts, and ensuring that more of the wealth remains within its borders. Mines like Bambara, operated by Orezone Gold, and Kiaka, under West African Resources, are set to drastically increase gold output by 2025. Bambara alone expects to exceed 170,000 ounces annually, while Kiaka is projected to reach 234,000 ounces per year, starting in the third quarter of 2025. But here's the part they won't tell you. These projects are laying the groundwork for economic independence. Burkina Faso isn't just mining gold, it's reclaiming it. Unlike in the past, where multinational corporations dictated terms, Burkina Faso is rewriting the rulebook. The goal? To ensure that local industries, small-scale miners, and national businesses benefit directly from this golden era. A shift like this threatens powerful foreign interests, and perhaps that's why the country faces constant economic and political obstacles. Gold isn't just Burkina Faso's biggest export, it's a game-changer for national revenue. In 2022, gold accounted for 96% of the country's extractive sector exports, bringing in a whopping 20.9% of public revenues and contributing 14.5% of the GDP. But these numbers only tell half the story. With higher control over its gold sector, the Burkina leadership is funneling more revenues into local industries, infrastructure, and social programs. The gold sector has created thousands of jobs in extraction, logistics, transportation, and trade. By reducing its reliance on Western financial institutions, Burkina Faso is carving out a path where its economy no longer depends on foreign aid or debt traps. But why does the global media ignore this side of Burkina Faso's story? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Because it doesn't fit the narrative they want you to believe. They'll show you conflict, displacement, and economic struggles, but they won't show you a nation strategically strengthening its control over one of the world's most precious resources. They won't talk about a government actively resisting neo-colonial economic control. They won't tell you that despite challenges, Burkina Faso's gold industry is thriving, growing, and becoming more independent. This is not a country in decline. This is a country in transformation. And the question isn't whether Burkina Faso will succeed, it's whether the world is ready for it. It doesn't end here. Gold might shine, but food sustains life. And in Burkina Faso, a revolution is taking place, not underground, but above it. While the media obsesses over conflicts and challenges, something much more powerful is happening in the fields, the farms, and the marketplaces. Agriculture, once seen as a secondary sector, is now becoming Burkina Faso's greatest weapon for economic independence. This isn't just about farming, it's about food sovereignty, self-sufficiency, and an economy built on the strength of its land. And yet, the world refuses to see it. For years, Burkina Faso, like many African nations, was trapped in a cycle of food imports and dependency. Foreign aid organizations framed themselves as saviors, pouring in resources to help the agricultural sector while simultaneously ensuring that local industries remained weak. But that era is coming to an end. Today, Burkina Faso is making agriculture the backbone of its economic strategy. The government isn't waiting for external support. It's actively investing in irrigation systems, promoting drought-resistant crops, and restructuring land policies to empower local farmers. Why is this important? Because a country that controls its food production controls its future. There will be no more reliance on expensive imports. There will be no more price manipulation by foreign markets. No more food insecurity dictated by outside interests. Everyone talks about Burkina Faso's mineral wealth, but few realize that one of its most valuable resources isn't gold. It's cotton. For decades, Burkina Faso has been one of Africa's top cotton producers, with a reputation for high-quality, pesticide-free cotton that's sought after in global markets. But here's where things get interesting. Rather than just exporting raw cotton, the country is now shifting towards processing its textile industry. This means less dependency on Western textile industries that have historically dictated prices and more domestic job creation, as local factories process cotton into fabric, clothing, and other finished products. Burkina Faso is also focusing on controlling the full supply chain, ensuring that profits stay within its borders rather than being extracted by foreign corporations. But Burkina Faso isn't stopping at cotton. One of the most significant agricultural transformations is crop diversification, an effort to reduce reliance on a single commodity and strengthen food security. Instead of depending on imported food products, Burkina Faso is expanding domestic production of key staples like rice, maize, sorghum, fruits, and vegetables. This diversification isn't just about economics, it's about national resilience. A nation that can feed itself cannot be controlled. Burkina Faso's agricultural revolution isn't just about planting more crops. It's about making farming sustainable in the long run. That's why modern irrigation systems are becoming a top priority. For decades, Burkina Faso's farming was largely dependent on seasonal rainfall, making agriculture unpredictable. But the new strategy is clear: expanding irrigation networks to ensure year-round farming and investing in water storage and reservoir projects to mitigate the impact of droughts. By doing this, Burkina Faso is eliminating the single biggest threat to its agricultural success: unpredictability. And in a world where climate change is becoming a growing concern, this level of foresight is not just smart, It's critical for survival. This transformation isn't happening in boardrooms, it's happening in the fields. Small-scale farmers, once ignored in economic discussions, are now the center of Burkina Faso's agricultural strategy. For too long, multinational agribusiness giants have dominated the African food system. But Burkina Faso is proving that when you put power in the hands of your people, the economy follows. If Burkina Faso's agricultural success is so significant, why don't you hear about it? Simple. Because it disrupts the narrative that Africa is dependent, that Africa cannot feed itself, and that Western intervention is always necessary. The moment Burkina Faso becomes fully self-sufficient in food production, it no longer needs foreign aid programs, Western NGOs, or economic assistance that always comes with strings attached. Burkina Faso is building an agricultural economy that benefits its people first. And that is exactly why you won't hear about this in global reports. Because a Burkina Faso that feeds itself is a Burkina Faso that is truly free. Here is where it gets more interesting. A nation's wealth isn't just in its minerals or agriculture. It's in its identity, in its stories, in the symbols that define who it is and what it stands for. But for centuries, Africa's narrative has been dictated by outsiders, by foreign powers that reduced its cultures to mere relics, its traditions to folklore, and its history to a past that only exists in museums. But in Burkina Faso, that is changing. Here, a cultural renaissance is taking place, one that isn't just preserving history, but shaping the future. This is a battle not for land, not for gold, but for something far greater: the right to tell one's own story. For generations, African cultures have been stripped, appropriated, and sold to the highest bidder. Burkina Faso knows this all too well. Its priceless artifacts, traditional masks, and sacred sculptures sit behind glass in European museums. These are objects that were stolen, looted, and preserved under the guise of protection. The irony? The very people who stole them now decide how they should be displayed. But Burkina Faso is no longer waiting for permission to reclaim its heritage. The movement to return stolen artifacts is gaining momentum. With growing diplomatic pressure, demands for restitution, and national awareness, the country is fighting to bring back what was taken. But here's the real story the media won't tell you. This isn't just about artifacts, it's about cultural power. Because a Burkina Faso that controls its history controls its future. Now is the time to show the world what Burkina Faso is really like. But how exactly? Through films. Yes, you heard that right. If you think Hollywood defines cinema, think again. Every 2 years, the city of Ouagadougou becomes the capital of African film, hosting the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou FESPACO, the largest and most influential film festival in Africa. For over 50 years, FESPACO has been more than just a film event. It's been a statement, a declaration that African stories deserve to be told by Africans, for Africans. And while the world obsesses over European and American cinema, Burkina Faso has been building an industry that speaks to the continent's history, struggles, and victories. But there's a reason why this festival isn't widely discussed in Western media. It disrupts the global entertainment monopoly. FESPACO challenges the dominance of Hollywood and Western media narratives. It proves that Africa has its thriving film industry, one that doesn't rely on foreign validation. It fosters a pan-African cultural exchange, uniting filmmakers, writers, and artists to create something uniquely African. While the Western film industry profits from stereotypes, pushing stories of African poverty, war, and corruption, FESPACO highlights African resilience, creativity, and brilliance. And that is a direct threat to the status quo. To the outside world, Burkina Faso's traditional masks might seem like simple carvings, tourist souvenirs, collectibles for foreign art dealers. But to the Burkinabe people, they are sacred, living representations of history, spirituality, and power. These masks are not decorations. They are symbols of identity, used in ceremonies, storytelling, and rituals that have been passed down for centuries. Each mask tells a story of kings, warriors, and ancestors. Yet over the years, Western collectors and museums have commercialized, appropriated, and decontextualized these sacred objects. They are auctioned off for millions, displayed in galleries with no mention of their spiritual significance, and stripped of their true meaning. But today, Burkina Faso's artists and cultural leaders are reclaiming this art. Instead of letting the world dictate its worth, they are revitalizing the tradition of mask making for local ceremonies and storytelling, and teaching younger generations about the spiritual and historical importance of these masks. They are building a cultural economy where local artisans benefit from their craft instead of foreign dealers. Because this isn't just about art, it's about ownership. The ownership of history, the ownership of creativity, and the ownership of a narrative that has long been controlled by outsiders. Burkina Faso's cultural renaissance isn't happening in isolation. Across Africa, a movement is rising, one that demands the return of stolen history, the preservation of indigenous traditions, and the rejection of Western-imposed narratives. Ghana is reclaiming its textile industry, pushing back against the flood of cheap foreign-made fabrics. Nigeria is demanding the return of the Benin bronzes, some of the most valuable African artifacts looted by colonial forces. Senegal is leading initiatives to preserve African oral history and traditional storytelling. In Burkina Faso, this cultural movement is taking shape in its film, its art, and its fight for self-representation. Because culture isn't just about the past, it's about power. And a Burkina Faso that owns its cultural identity cannot be controlled. Ask yourself, why does the world still define Africa by its struggles but never by its triumphs? Why is African culture celebrated when it's showcased in Western museums, but ignored when it flourishes in its homeland? Lastly, let's talk about the serious problems the media shows you in Burkina Faso. The headlines will tell you about instability, displacement, and violence. They will show you the chaos, but they will never show you what's happening beneath the surface. The resilience, the rebuilding, and the quiet revolution taking place across the country. The truth is, Burkina Faso is not waiting for foreign intervention. It is not asking for Western assistance that comes with strings attached. Instead, it is doing something far more powerful, reclaiming its stability on its terms. And that's a story the world refuses to tell. For years, the world has labeled Burkina Faso as a fragile state, as if the people of this nation have been sitting idly by, waiting to be saved. But anyone who looks beyond the headlines will see something completely different. Across the country, communities are organizing, local leaders are stepping up, and new models of governance are being tested, ones that prioritize local solutions over foreign influence. The Burkinabe people are not just surviving, they are adapting, rebuilding, and proving that real stability doesn't come from foreign powers but from within. So, what exactly is happening? What are the stories they don't want you to see? In times of crisis, some nations turn to external aid. Burkina Faso is turning to something more powerful: its people. Across villages, town. While foreign governments claim that only international intervention can stabilize Burkina Faso, the reality is that stability is already being built from the ground up, without the need for foreign oversight. For decades, security in West Africa has been framed as a problem that only Western forces can fix. The result? French military bases, US drone operations, and foreign troops who claim to bring peace, yet leave nations more unstable than they found them. Burkina Faso has had enough. Under its new leadership, the country is taking a radical approach, a security strategy that no longer depends on Western forces. But this kind of independence comes at a price. It threatens the interests of global powers that profit from instability. And so, the narrative is twisted. When Burkina Faso removes foreign military presence, they call it a security risk. When it builds local solutions, they call it unstable. But the truth is, a Burkina Faso that defends itself is a Burkina Faso that cannot be controlled. Western media will tell you about the displacement crisis in Burkina Faso. And yes, it's true. Millions have been forced to flee their homes due to conflict and insurgency. But what they won't tell you is how the Burkinabe people are responding. Instead of waiting for international organizations to dictate solutions, Burkina Faso is creating its models of humanitarian support. Instead of relying solely on international NGOs, Burkina Faso is investing in its programs to support displaced populations. The government is prioritizing local food production and domestic supply chains to reduce dependence on foreign food aid. Unlike many nations that push refugees into camps with no long-term solutions, Burkina Faso is integrating displaced populations into local communities, ensuring they have access to jobs, schools, and basic services. This is what makes Burkina Faso different. It is not just addressing the humanitarian crisis. It is doing so to ensure long-term stability rather than short-term dependency. So ask yourself, why won't the world acknowledge this? A Burkina Faso that controls its resources, feeds itself, shapes its own culture, secures its land, empowers its youth, and dominates the digital economy is a Burkina Faso that cannot be controlled. And a nation that cannot be controlled is a threat, not to its people, but to those who have spent decades exploiting it. So the next time they show you Burkina Faso as a place of chaos, ask yourself, why are they hiding the progress? Why are they terrified of a Burkina Faso that stands on its own 2 feet? Because this country isn't collapsing, it is rising. And whether the world likes it or not, the Burkina Faso of the future will not be dictated by anyone but its people. This is the Burkina Faso the media will never show you. But now you know. Do you think the media will ever show you this side? And why not? Why are they so insecure? Let us know in the comment section. Is the world even ready to see Burkina Faso's reality? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.